Every single time you type a message to ChatGPT, you're generating dozens of invisible tokens, tiny chunks of text, that the AI processes through billions of calculations. That processing is brutally expensive. The average conversation burns thousands of tokens, translating directly into dollars companies lose. A startup just raised $98 million because they figured out how to cut the tokens your AI needs by up to 80%. That's not marginal, that's a complete reimagining of how AI computes. If they pull it off, the entire AI industry gets cheaper overnight. Here's what's shocking: AI companies already throw away millions on wasted compute daily. They know it's happening. They've accepted it as the cost of business. But this startup discovered something foundational that everyone missed: a way to restructure how AI processes information so most of that waste vanishes. It's not a tweak or optimization. It's a completely different architecture. The implications are staggering. If this works, ChatGPT could answer a question for a penny instead of $1. Smaller companies could afford AI models previously too expensive. Autonomous vehicles could make real-time decisions without burning a fortune. Medical AI could run on hospital servers instead of cloud data centers. This isn't just about cheaper AI for consumers. It's about unlocking applications that were mathematically impossible before. And the venture capital world is betting they actually cracked it. Let me break down what tokens actually are, because it's the foundation of this story. When you type a message to an AI, that message gets converted into tokens, tiny mathematical representations of language. A token is roughly every 4 characters. The word beautiful breaks into 2 or 3 tokens. Your entire message might be 40 or 50 tokens. But here's where it gets expensive. The AI doesn't just process your message once. It reads through it token by token, then generates an output, doing the same thing in reverse. For a 10-word response, the AI processes 500 tokens internally. For a long conversation, that number explodes into millions. And it's not just processing, it's storing. Every token requires memory. If you're running a language model in the cloud, you're paying for compute time and the memory those tokens occupy. That's why OpenAI charges by the token. GPT-4o costs 3 cents per million input tokens. ChatGPT costs less, but it adds up. A single 20-minute conversation with GPT-4o might cost 50 cents to $5. Scale that across billions of daily conversations worldwide, and you're looking at billions of dollars spent on token processing. Most of those tokens are mathematically redundant. The AI's computing the same steps over and over. But wait, there's something nobody's talking about. That waste is actually avoidable. So what exactly did this startup figure out that everyone else missed? The key is something called speculative decoding, though these researchers have their own proprietary twist on it. Here's the basic idea. Most language models work like a chess player calculating one move at a time. They generate one token, then look at that token, then generate the next token, then look at that one. It's sequential. Each token depends on the previous token. So you have to do this token-by-token process for the entire output. But what if you could predict ahead? What if a smaller, faster model could guess what the next 10 tokens should be, and then the full model could verify whether that guess is correct? If it is, you've saved 9 processing steps. If it's not, you reject the guess and start over. On average, you're skipping tons of redundant work. This is called speculative decoding, and it can reduce tokens your model needs to process by 50 to 80% depending on the task. That means fewer operations, less memory, lower latency, and massively lower cost. OpenAI and Google both published research on this technique, but this startup figured out how to make it work better, faster, and cheaper than anyone else. They've optimized it for real-world inference, not just lab benchmarks. This is where it gets complicated. Let's talk about what this actually means in practice. Imagine you're building a company that uses AI to generate customer support responses at scale. With traditional inference, each response might cost you 2 cents in compute. With speculative decoding, that same response costs you less than half a cent. Scale that to 1 million customer interactions per day. That's the difference between spending $20,000 daily versus $5,000 daily. Or consider autonomous vehicles. Tesla, Waymo, and other self-driving car companies run AI models constantly on the car to make real-time driving decisions. Every millisecond of latency matters for safety. Speculative decoding doesn't just save cost, it slashes latency. The model can answer faster, which means quicker reactions to road hazards. That's not just an economic win, that's a safety win. For medical imaging, a hospital might run thousands of AI scans per day to help radiologists detect cancers and diseases. Right now, that requires expensive servers and loads the hospital's bandwidth. With 80% cost reduction, smaller hospitals could afford their own on-premise AI systems instead of relying on cloud subscriptions. The startup that raised this funding believes they can license this technology to every major AI company. OpenAI, Google, Meta, Anthropic. All of them, each one runs inference at a staggering scale. If even one of them implements speculative decoding, they save hundreds of millions annually. That's why the investors believe this is worth $98 million. Here's the twist nobody expected. Here's the interesting part. Speculative decoding isn't entirely new. OpenAI and Google's researchers have both published papers on it. So why didn't they just implement this themselves and keep the $98 million windfall? Because it's brutally hard to productionize. Making speculative decoding work in the lab is one thing. Making it work reliably, safely, and faster than the existing inference pipeline is another entirely. You need to know exactly which smaller models work best for which tasks. You need to handle edge cases where the speculation wildly fails. You need to integrate it without breaking existing APIs. And you need to do all this while maintaining accuracy. You absolutely cannot have the speed-up come at the cost of wrong answers. This startup apparently figured out solutions to all of those problems. They've built proprietary techniques that make speculative decoding work better than the published research suggests it should. That's the defensible moat that investors are betting on. Compare this to other AI efficiency startups that tried to do cheaper inference. Most either gave slightly slower responses or had accuracy trade-offs. This approach gets you both speed and accuracy. You're not sacrificing anything, you're just eliminating waste. The investment makes sense because this startup can license the technology to everyone else rather than competing directly with OpenAI or Google. They become the infrastructure layer that powers cheaper inference across the entire industry. This is where the real story starts. So if AI inference becomes 80% cheaper, who wins and who loses? Let's think through the consequences. First, the winners. Literally every company building on top of AI wins. If you're running a chatbot, your costs plummet. If you're running image generation, your margins suddenly expand. Small startups that couldn't afford to compete with OpenAI's scale can now run their own models profitably. The technology democratizes AI in a way that no amount of open sourcing could. But here's the complicated part. The companies that currently profit from expensive AI inference lose. OpenAI, Anthropic, and others make money by running inference at scale. If the cost of running inference drops 80%, they either pass that savings to consumers, which means lower prices, or they keep it and have massively improved margins. Either way, the AI market becomes more competitive. They'll still win because they have the best models, but some of the economic moat they've built disappears. They're no longer just selling inference at a high margin. They're selling the best models, period. Second, the startup that raised $98 million could become the most valuable AI infrastructure company in the world. If they can license this technology to OpenAI, Google, Meta, and all the others, they've positioned themselves at the absolute center of how AI works. Third, consumers win in the long run. Cheaper inference means cheaper AI products. That means more people can access AI-powered tools. The part most people overlook entirely is that this could accelerate AI adoption by years. If you're building AI products today, here's what you should actually do. Start paying attention to inference optimization. The days of just throwing compute at the problem are ending. Companies are going to start competing on efficiency, not just on model quality. For developers, that means understanding token usage in your prompts. Every token costs money. If you're crafting prompts for your application, make them as concise as possible. Don't send unnecessary context to your AI. This isn't new advice, but it's about to become way more important as companies race to margins. For companies running their own inference, Watch what happens with speculative decoding adoption. If OpenAI or Google starts offering speculative decoding as an option in their APIs, take it. You'll see immediate cost reductions. For investors, this startup raised $98 million because they solved a billion-dollar problem. If they can execute on licensing and integration, the return on investment could be astronomical. But remember, the company still has to successfully negotiate with major AI labs and prove their technology works at production scale. Execution risk is real. For the broader industry, this is what real technical progress looks like. It's not a new model or a new algorithm. It's finding something broken in the foundation and actually fixing it. Speculative decoding isn't flashy. It doesn't make headlines like a new reasoning model or a new data set, but it might end up being more valuable than any of those breakthroughs. But here's the kicker. Most of the value might not accrue to the startup at all. Here's what this story means for you. AI is about to get radically cheaper and faster, which changes what's possible. Things that were too expensive to build with AI last year might become practical this year. The AI industry's economics are shifting from a winner-take-all market where only OpenAI and Google could afford to run inference at scale, to a market where the bottleneck is model quality, not compute cost. This $98 million investment is a signal that serious investors see this change happening. They're betting that efficiency becomes the next frontier of AI competition, and they're betting that this particular startup cracked something real that nobody else has figured out yet. The bigger implication is that the AI arms race just shifted. It's not just about who has the best models anymore. It's about who can run those models most efficiently. That changes which companies win and which ones lose. It changes what kind of AI products become feasible. It changes the timeline for AI adoption across medicine, law, engineering, and 1,000 other fields. If you're following AI news, this is one of those foundational stories that will matter years from now. Not because the headline is flashy, but because the implications are genuinely significant. Follow for daily AI news like this, the stories that actually reshape what's possible.